Hey guys, 21 Darkster here. Today I'm doing a science experiment kind of thing. I'm going to teach you guys how to make coins, as you can see here. This is kind of this is a coin out of solder. So this is the solder right here. So the things you're going to need, of course, are solder. This is not necessary. I'm going to show you why I had these out in a second. There was actually another recording that I did that I had to delete because the camera ran out of battery, so I'm doing this on my iPad. So you're gonna need of course, solder, which is right here. This is the thicker solder, which is meant kind of for a blowtorch, but this little soldering iron that I have here, which of course you're also gonna need. You're gonna need your soldering iron and a wet sponge if you want. If you're using the propane one, you don't need that, obviously. So this right here, which you're probably all wondering, this is actually the bottom of this aluminum can. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of shape the coin like this. It's not going to have these rigged edges because if I do the math correctly, as you can see, it won't take the shape of that. It'll probably just take the shape of something. Even if it does take the shape of that, I can easily remold it. And I tried to pound this down flat, but it's kind of impossible because of the shape of the bottom of the can. But I got as flat as I could. I'm doing this on a piece of wood because, as you can see, I did this before and it made this huge stain here. If I did it on here, I don't want to melt the paint. I don't want to get my soldering iron all dirty. So I'm going to get set up and we'll begin. Okay, so this is the workstation that I have. I tried my best to make it so you guys get a front view of how I'm going to do this. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a good amount of solder. Now, if I accidentally say flux, I don't know why I say flux because this is not flux. Flux is a totally different substance. I just like the word, I guess, so I use it. I'm just going to cut it. So you have like a good amount of solder. Actually, we have some flux in here. It's kind of looks almost like wax you put on your car. But anyway, this is solder. It's a mixture of copper and tin, I think. Copper and aluminum, I can't remember. But before we do that, I want to see if my soldering iron can melt aluminum. This is an aluminum bit that I got from my can. I want to see if my soldering iron can actually do this. So let's put it right here so you guys get a front row view. See, maybe this can do that. And this aluminum's really hot because it is a metal, and this, I don't know what currently the temperature of my soldering iron is. I never bothered to check. But if it can't melt aluminum, we know it's colder than the melting point for aluminum. No, can't melt aluminum. Didn't really make a mark either. So anyway, the reason why I'm using pliers is so I can hold the solder in place without it going crazy. Because, ow. What ends up happening sometimes is the solder will melt very quickly, and it's very satisfying to watch, and it's partially what happens. I think I'll do it right here so you guys get a front row view of how solder melts. It looks really cool. And as it melts, the heat from this will actually travel up this and will burn me if I touch it. So I just grabbed some pliers here that I got from the garage. I'm going to do that. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to melt this long strand of solder. So you're just going to put it on the ground. You're going to touch the tip of the solder with your soldering iron. And it should just melt. So as you can see, it's starting to smoke. And as you can see, it's creating a metal ball, and as I push more towards it, it melts it instantly. And it stopped melting. There we go. And it creates this really pretty metallic ball. Now this ball of solder will harden almost instantly. So when you do this, you have to be very quick. And I can feel the wrench that I'm holding getting hot, even though it has rubber hands, rubber gripping, because this is, I don't know what type of metal this wrench is. It's probably steel or something, but definitely really hot. And I'm just going to incorporate that little bit. So you can see we have a ball of solder here. This ball of solder is not fun to play with. It is really hot. And so, if we let it cool, which I'm going to do right now, I'm just going to leave it there. It will cool almost instantly if I do not touch it. And if we try to poke it now, oh, it's actually still hot. That's cool. I think that's the fastest it's ever gotten. I think that's the slowest it's ever frozen or gotten solid. It's starting to solidify, which is good. While that's going, I'm going to go ahead and tape my little palette, not palette, a little stamper onto the mallet so it goes like this. Or like this. I think I'm just going to tape it like this, and then when I stamp it down, it should work really well. So let me get some tape. So I'm just going to be using some simple duct tape, not duct tape, duct tape, because it is a metal. I just hope that the hotness from this won't melt the duct tape. And we're just going to stamp it. We're going to put the stamp right on top of here. So you can see we kind of have like a makeshift stamp, so we can go like this. So yeah. So actually this is now hardened, and if we try to pick it up, which we can, see it's just a ball of solder now. And this is actually really hot, and that's partially why I forgot to tell you guys, you need a cup of water. And so what we're going to do is when we're done with our coin, we're just going to put it in the water and it'll cool it. That'll help us kind of work out any blemishes or something that we may have. I'm not going to actually put this on the camera. It's just going to be off to the side here, so if you guys want to hear the sound of it cooling off, it's going to sound really cool. However, it's hard to resolder after you cool it off because of the temperature of the metal. So we're going to reheat this up. Just like this. We're just going to grab it like this. Actually, we're going to reheat this up because it's good solder. I don't want to waste it. And we're going to take our stamp. We're going to put this to the side. Uh-oh. Looks like my soldering iron's falling apart. There we go. This will work perfectly. I'm just going to put this to the side, that little stamp here, because we don't need it just yet. I'm going to hang it up right here because if not, it'll fall off. Anyway, so we're going to take our solder, and that's really hot. I shouldn't have done that. Don't touch solder after you use it. And the problem with using wood, which I recommend you use if you have a metal surface, use it, because the problem with using wood is it likes to freeze, it likes to burn, and the solder will actually pick up the burnt wood. So anyway, we're just going to try to remelt this. See if we can remelt this. It's going to take a minute to remelt just because it's a lot of solder. Once when it'll melt, remelt, it's actually really interesting to watch because some parts of it get hotter than others, and you eventually have parts that are melted more than others, and that's kind of what's causing it not to melt in the beginning. So my soldering iron is falling apart because this little spring here is not staying on to the... Okay, that'll do for now. I just need it to temporarily stay in there. Okay, so I'm going to take more solder and I'm going to cut it off. And this is going to be the appropriate amount of solder we're going to use for this coin. Now, if you don't have a lot of solder, do not do this project because this project requires a good amount of solder. So anyway, we're going to take our soldering iron and move you out of the way so you guys get a better view. We're just going to remelt our solder. This time we're going to do it over this metal thing. So here we go. And what this will do is it'll melt this solder, and hopefully the melted solder will get hot enough to melt the bigger one. And it's actually doing that, which is perfect. And I need to be using pliers, but definitely should be using pliers because I can definitely feel the whatchamacallit, the heat from this all the way up here. So anyway, our ball is actually starting to melt back into the liquid, back into a liquid form. So that means that tin and I believe this is copper actually have a very, very low melting point, which is really cool. Not saying that this isn't hot, because this is very hot, but compared to like aluminum and bronze and all that, this is really like nothing. So you can see we're melting our solder. It's actually really satisfying to watch. I love melting solder. So, uh-oh, my camera fell over. I can make this work. So our solder is melted. I'm going to fix my camera. I'm not sure why it did that. Oh, I know why, because this thing is being stupid. Okay. Okay, nice. We'll tape it like this. You guys can see good, too. So we have our melted solder here. So now this is when you're going to take your stamper, or whatever you're going to use, and I'm just going to give it a nice flat stamp just like this. As you can see, we stamped our coin, and it should pick it up, and it shouldn't actually stick to this because they're two different metals. And just as I suspected, it got hot enough to melt the glue off of this, and my stamp fell off. But all that really matters is we got a nice flat piece of solder almost, except right here is a little uneven. Good thing it's still hot enough to kind of remelt, which I'm really happy about. I think we're going to redo this. As you can see, you can easily remelt this coin right after use, but if you want to wait, it's going to be harder to remelt after you put it inside of the water. And for some reason, I don't know why it does this, but it likes to stick to wood. I'm not entirely sure on why. I don't know what type of wood this is, if it's the sealant they put on the wood that's melting, or if it's the wood itself, but leave that in the comments if you guys know why it's doing that. But I'm trying to remelt, as you can see, and it's turning into clumps, and I think that's because I'm not doing it fast enough. And as soon as I flattened it, I think what happened was it got colder in other places than I wanted it to. So I'm just going to remelt the solder. I'm trying to get my stamp back on here, which it finally did. I'm just going to put you to the side. Okay, we're going to remelt our solder now. It could also be helpful to take a little bit more solder, just to kind of give it newer stuff, and it helps it melt better. Just not a lot, just a tiny little snippet of it. And simply just use your pliers to hold it in place and just melt it down. What this should do is it should melt everything else better because you're putting a newer heating element on top of it. So here we go. And I know I'm going to see YouTube comments saying I'm not holding the soldering iron right, or etc., etc. I'm just... There we go. And something interesting that I really liked, that I really thought was cool, is this solder doesn't actually stick to the wrench. And I think that's because they're two different types of metals. I don't know why it does that, because it's a different type of metal, but I know it's probably because it's a different type of metal. But anyway, here we go. We actually got the entire blob to melt consistently enough, I should say. We're now going to take our stamper again, and we're going to stamp it down. And right immediately as we do this, it's something cool. It'll actually immediately, solidify almost immediately, and that's because we flatten it down and we're allowing all the heat to come out. And I'll just leave it just like this. As you can see, our stamper got stuck to the metal again, and I'm not going to touch that because that's probably extremely hot. And it didn't get stuck to the metal, actually. It flattened it almost evenly, which is what I wanted. So I'm just going to clean this off real quick. Okay, so now we have our flattened piece of solder, and if I try to poke it, it is solid, not melted anymore, and I can actually move it, as you can see. Now we're going to take these pliers, or you can take bigger ones, and you're going to put it in your cup of water, and this will kind of make it cool so you can engrave some stuff onto it, if you don't want to engrave it. I'm going to engrave it with a 2 and a 1 on the back. This is because we are the Dark Legion, and we are mini, so I'm going to put a number 2 right here on the front. So I'm just going to draw with my right here. You're going to just draw the number 2. Now this is we just finished using this, so it shouldn't have cooled off that much. If it did, that's okay. This is solder. And I'm just going to try to draw the number 2 here. Now, some people are going to be asking, why can't you just use other solder to draw on top of it? And that's because solder does not like to stick to solder. They're the same element, so they're just going to melt together. That looks like a number 1. I'm going to flip this over now, and we're going to draw the number 1. Just like this. We're going to slowly melt the number 1 into here. You don't want to go too fast. There we go. Oh, you guys can't really see this, I'm sorry, but it's kind of coming into shape. Just going to slowly but surely just start graving the number 1. And this is going to be your thing right here. It's actually cold. It's actually hot enough. Maybe we, instead of graving it with this, maybe we can use like a screwdriver or something and just kind of chisel it in there. Actually, this is working, and I think, again, because it's really hot, and there goes our camera again. I apologize. This is like held up by a piece of pipe and something else. Anyway, I think what's happening is our metal's really hot, so it's actually bendable still. But we got kind of a 1 on this side, and there it goes again. Hold on. There we go. So let's try heating this up again, because this is still really hot. It's not as hot as it was before, which isn't bad, but I still want it to be kind of warm. I'm going to flip this over. Don't do that, by the way. I can kind of see it too here, and that'll be good enough. I don't want it, like, you know, deeply engraved. Just for the sake of the video, I'm going to speed this up. So then you're going to take your coin, and you're going to put it in the water. And this will cool it off so you guys can see your coin. You can do what you need to do to it. I can pick this up. That would be great. If you guys don't have a cup of water, you can just cool it off and just wait for it that way. Whatever works for you. I'm just going to put this in the water. And right now it is cooled inside of the water. So our coin is probably cooled off by now because it is a metal. And it looks like there's actually it looks like our metal is already oxidized. I'm going to take these bigger pliers and just try to reach in there and grab it. Looks like our metal has already oxidized. Huh, interesting. It tells me that there is probably tin or some sort of copper or silver in here because it did oxidize almost immediately when I put it in the water. You can also use liquid nitrogen if you have any. This liquid nitrogen will probably work better because it'll almost solidify immediately. This is just a little science experiment that I like to do, though. There's no real science behind it, and I know that we're just basically the majority of the stuff I'm doing here can be avoided, but it's still fun to do. There we go. So we have our coin. I'm gonna put that there. You guys heard that plop, and yeah. So I'm just gonna try to put these back up here. Okay. So here's our coin. Nice and cool to the touch just because we put it inside the water. It looks like what actually happened is our number 2 didn't really make it out, but there is a number 1 on this side. You guys can kind of see it down the middle there. It's kind of just right down the middle there. I can see it on the camera. Number 2 didn't really make it though because we didn't use the method. And as you can see, it's not really bendable. It's not. And it makes a good solid coin if you just want to have fun making stuff. I'd never actually tried making ingots with this though. That would be pretty fun to do. And in case you don't want this like this, you can easily remelt it back down. I actually made another coin right here, so now I have 2 of them. It looks really cool. It kind of looks like currency before it was like an official thing. This is the one we did with the hammers. You can see it has more edges and more rough. This one's a little bit more smooth around the edges. And because we did it with a piece of metal, and we mashed it down. So one of the things that I've always wanted to do was take molten solder and put it in water. So let's do just that. I'm going to show you guys what happens. So we're going to take molten solder. I shouldn't say that. Melted solder. It's not molten. There we go. So we have our soldering iron. We're just going to take this and we're going to melt it down right here. Here we go. And I got splashed with some solder because this is solder. Oh. So you can see a lot of oxygen is forming in there. I think that's because the solder actually has oxygen in it, and that's kind of bad. Especially when you're doing this with a blowtorch. I don't see how you can do this really well. Also may have been because I was holding it towards the ground. So we have our ball here. I don't know how I'm going to get it immediately into the water. I think I have an idea. What if let's take... Let me try taking this big screwdriver. Oh, wait, here's a bigger one. It smells like burnt wood, so it tells me that I actually accidentally put my soldering iron too close to the ground. So we got molten salt, we got melted solder right on top of the screwdriver here, and it's solidified almost immediately because it's interesting. We're going to put it directly into the water. So you can see it made that noise, and that's because it's really hot and now it's cooled off. And the thing about solder is it cools off almost immediately. I don't know if you guys can hear that, but that's me putting it on top of a sponge and it cools off almost immediately. And I can cool it's cool enough to the touch. And it just comes right off of other metals, as you can see. So we have that ball of solder that I put in here. I'm going to go drain this out now because we don't need it anymore. So this is that ball of solder that, excuse me, that I put directly into the water, and it shaped it very interestingly. It almost has liquid properties. It actually went into the water. I don't know if you guys can see that. There's a little spike on top, and it actually went into the water and solidified like that. So it tells me it actually fell into the water and was about to go into like almost another, because this is probably more dense than the water or vice versa. and it was probably about to go into like a strain form, but solidified before it could do that, which is really cool. I think that's going to be it. Thank you guys for watching. If you want more videos like this where I do more kind of fun with my soldering iron or whatever, let me know. This has been 21 Darkster. I will see you on the next video. If I was unclear about anything, I'll probably do a follow-up video, but these are the coins that you could make using solder. And we didn't use much solder at all. We actually have a lot left. That's been it for this video. I'll see you on the next video, guys. Peace out.